My first major encounter with the fallacy of invincible ignorance was during my debate with David Rohl. I had encountered it before, but never in such a blatant way. Find out about this common debate tactic and logical fallacy on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. To understand invincible ignorance, we need to discuss what is called vincible ignorance. Vincible ignorance is a concept that comes out of Roman Catholic moral theology. We all live in ignorance of some kind. Vincible ignorance is ignorance that can be overcome by modest effort and is therefore considered a venial sin in Roman Catholicism. And that is because overcoming that ignorism is easily within the reach of the individual. On the other hand, invincible ignorance is ignorance that the holder cannot or is unable to overcome. Essentially, a person who has invincible ignorance is unable to overcome their own ignorance. Now, the idea of the fallacy of invincible ignorance goes beyond that idea that one cannot overcome their ignorance and transforms the idea into a debate tactic where a person refuses or will not accept or engage evidence to overcome their ignorance. In short, the person chooses to ignore or refuses to accept any contrary evidence. This is also called the argument by stubbornness or argument by pig-headedness. Essentially, with the fallacy of invincible ignorance, the debater simply refuses to accept the existence or reality of any evidence they don't like. When I debated David Rohl, I told him his new chronology was invalid because it did not account for the 150 points of synchronistic evidence among rulers across the ancient Near East. Rohl's response was to deny those synchronisms existed and mock the evidence. He even refused to look at my list of citations documenting each synchronism that I conveniently brought to the 2017 debate. The refusal to examine the evidence is invincible ignorance. But it isn't just confined to, say, debating tactics. It can also be seen among skeptics that claim that nothing you say that can convince them that there is some truth in the Bible. This is an overt kind of invincible ignorance fallacy. We even find the fallacy of invincible ignorance inserted within popular aphorisms. Take, for example, the famous Carl Sagan quote that, quote, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, end quote. While that sounds good on the surface, it conceals an invincible ignorance fallacy. What exactly one deems as extraordinary or an extraordinary claim is no longer subject to ordinary evidence, but a subjective standard of evidence that is potentially so high that it has no maximal limit. That is a veiled fallacy of invincible ignorance, i.e., that may be evidence, but it isn't evidence that is extraordinary enough, so it's not evidence. Now, evidence can be evaluated. It can be bad or poor evidence, or even not evidence at all. But if a material fact supports a claim, it is evidence whether it is extraordinary or not. It is evidence or it is not evidence. And it's even worse than that, because in logical argumentation, mundane evidence is often the best evidence because it is the least contestable. Overall, extraordinary evidence is epistemological nonsense that disguises a fallacy of invincible ignorance. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you learned something today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.